it seems like functional medicine is probably one of the better defining ways of how you would categorize your business.
I think that once you start becoming interested in your health in general,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a great idea to see somebody with this kind of approach, because we can help you identify key factors in your lifestyle.
What is it that you would truly say IFP truly does?
Yeah, well, we match the complete picture of every angle of your health. We're not just piecemealing this part or this part or this part. Everybody does a part of what we do, but nobody can quarterback everything into one complete picture and see. Like, you want somebody that's managing all your care. It's frustrating to go to the doctor and be like, hey, I got this doctor, I'm a cardiologist, got this and this and this, and there will always be that for some source.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to be able to go to a place where your personal trainer talks to your cook, talks to your therapist, talks to your, main provider, talks to, the person that does your, programming and stuff like that. And that's the overall goal of what we want to be able to do, is to be able to put that in a complete picture. And honestly, that's why we've targeted personal trainers in general, is because I actually see that as the centerpiece, believe it or not. So we're kind of like leading from behind in a sense of making that happen. But yet the personal trainer, who sees the patient more than the personal trainer? Nobody. These are the people that make those relationships. They see them every single day. They hear about their marriages, their personal life, their stressors. These guys are their coaches. They should be the ones that is sort of orchestrating that. And we want to be able to bring them in and be able to have those other services for them and educate them on how to integrate that and expand that out and utilize everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's I was going to say, that's a very comprehensive picture. And obviously with the state of the world and how healthcare is not necessarily trending in the right direction from an outcome-based perspective, we have more obesity, more heart disease, all these clinical outcomes that are frankly just devastating for lives. And it sounds like you guys are really putting a stake in the ground of like, hey, this is a broken model. We're going to fix this. Where did like all of this stuff come from? Maybe you share a little bit about your genesis story and kind of how this even came to be.
This ideal project, my actual like background and like how this all evolved.
Yeah, that'd be great. Just give the listeners a sense of like, why this is important to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I grew up, just even growing up, I evolved, and sports basically changed my life. I think wrestling itself was like one of the sports that like changed my life, my confidence, but that got me into athletics in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up losing my best friend in high school to an accident. As I was going through some training to be a firefighter and learning CPR and whatnot. And that just sort of set me on this mission into the healthcare world in general. So we were in racing cars and stuff like that. And he got hit by a car when we were out racing one night, and this whole different big deal. And Life Flight ended up coming and taken him to the hospital, and he passed away 3 days later, never woke up. Mm-hmm. And but that just kind of not only was a traumatic event in my life and introduced me to these amazing PTSD qualities that I carried for 2 decades in my life, untreated, and whatnot. But it basically sort of set this bar as just like those ladies that came and took care of him. Like, I wanted to be that. And so as I pursued my journey and to healthcare, I decided like, hey, what's the best way to sort of put this together? And I've tried to really just put together the most complete package possible. So, I finished out my training as a firefighter and a paramedic, and then went on to become a nurse, and then basically worked in every little area of nursing, from pediatric. I lived in Atlanta for a while, worked at Evanston, Josh Wright. Evanston was my first job, worked in PICU there, and in the NICU. And, and then basically just did everything. But also simultaneously, continued my health journey, where, I continued in fitness. And so I embarked on this journey where, I started, in high school, like I said, I wrestled, but I continued my weight training, got into powerlifting, Had a really good friend who was a natural bodybuilder, and he and she. I was just like, how do you do your diet? How do you do your dieting? Like, because like no matter what I could do, I couldn't ever get lean. Like I felt like as much as I worked out and cardio and this and that, and like it was not a big. It was like, how do you get to be like ripped? And she's like, oh, my friend Burrow Nunez he's my coach. And I'm like, who's this guy? You know, and it's just like, and he's like, you know, so I learned and hired him to do my diet and nutrition. And I was like, wow, this is great, you know, and he was smarter than any dietitian I've ever come across in my entire life. And then, so, you know, I got really interested in like the dieting, the programming and powerlifting. And then, you know, I continued in martial arts. And then just as chance happened in life, I just met more people, you know, and so I met a really good friend who's, you know, out in California, who's just very, very high up in the fitness industry and did a lot of stuff for NASM and their original curriculum and works for Alico now. And I got very, you know, I ended up just started getting connected in this fitness world and industry. And then I read this book that sort of introduced me to functional medicine before, you know, his sort of marketing thing, you know, and so I just really sort of explored the importance of, you know, or the detriment of all the things that we have in life, like the deodorants, you know, the metals in our deodorants, the fluorinated water, the artificial sweeteners, and, you know, the importance of gut health. And
as I sit here and drink my Coke Zero.
Exactly. Depleting your.
But there's no calories, bro. There's no calories.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole thing in itself, you know. But I mean, needless to say, it introduced me. It triggered sort of, you know, like, hey, this is something that I'm very interested in, and normal health doesn't do this, but I like working out, and I, you know, and I want to be able to help people get better, and you know, and so as I continued along my journey, I, you know, worked for over a decade as a nurse, and I went back to anesthesia school and pharmacology school and functional medicine school, and decided that, hey, this is what I eventually want to do. And, you know, and it just sort of evolved into the right opportunities, meeting the right people. And I just love, number one, being the black sheep of my world, doing things that are different, you know, that as long as they make sense, not just for the sake of doing different, but I just like to evolve, and I'm just not opposed to like sort of bucking the status quo. Like nothing irks me more than somebody who's been practicing for a decade and says, hey, this is how I was trained. I hate that. I absolutely hate that with a passion. To be like, you haven't changed what you do since what you learned in school. That's sad.
Yeah.
That you haven't kept up, you haven't evolved. Because I'll tell you, like, my anesthesia training was very important to me. I felt like I got an extremely good education, but I haven't practiced a day of my life in that way since the day I graduated. I was evolving right out of the gate. And honestly, I don't even know if I could know how to deliver an anesthetic the way that I was trained in school anymore, because I've evolved into such a different path of, you know, delivering anesthesia in like opioid free manner, and using regional anesthesia and ultrasound and things like that. So the same thing with the functional medicine world and medicine in general. You know, I know there's got to be a better way, you know, despite, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things a different way, but there's got to be a better way than just like, hey, just feeding people pills, doing this. And it's not that, you know, people have bad intentions. I think that some of these people are just so overworked, it's hard to spend the time to be comprehensive and look at a lot of root cause stuff, you know. And I think a lot of people argue that they treat root cause, but I really don't, because it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of information, and it really requires a whole different mindset. So sometimes when people hear, hey, functional medicine, they think that it's some voodoo bullcrap, you know, and just like some people that goes to this holistic schooling. No, almost everybody that does functional medicine has been trained traditionally in medicine. So they know how to do medicine in the traditional manner.
I feel like a prereq to do functional medicine is to be a conspiracy theorist, though. I'm just 100%. Based upon all of you that I know.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say I'm not going to tell you I don't have my theories, because I do, but I don't want to misguide the conversation or, you know, whatnot, because, but I am pretty open to a lot of things, and there does have to be a different way of doing things. And so that's sort of like, where I sort of ended up. And then, the idea of having a clinic out of gyms and being able to integrate with the trainers I just think it's very important. Like, I hurt my back pretty decent early in my career. Like when I was really young, and literally I was going to pain docs and all. Like I hurt so bad. Like I couldn't move. I couldn't even walk. Like it was this mess. It was horrible. And honestly, the guy that fixed me is my friend, who is literally, he has a degree in, um, sports science, basically. He's a guy that's talking about California, and he's big on movement and myofascial, type of stuff, and he literally fixed me just through different types of nutritional stuff, and like you could equate it to like the personal training type stuff, and I was like, there's something to this.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of stuff can't be undercut. I'm not saying that there's not value in some of those other things, but I was just like, when nobody could help me, this guy literally helped me. And to this day, I have never had a needle shoved in my back. I've never had surgery on my back. I mean, I've had a herniated disc since I was 22, between L4 and L5. And I've 25 years almost. And since then I've gone through a whole decade of powerlifting and martial arts and, just everything.
Yeah.
So
sounds like you've had quite the journey. There are a couple of things in there that you've mentioned that are probably commonplace terms for you, things that you just use in your day-to-day, vernacular and vocabulary. I think they might be a little foreign to the listeners, though, and I think that they're probably a really essential part of how you operate as a professional after hearing, your experiences in loss and firefighting and like the whole medical route, going into the fitness route, going into the nutrition route, like looking at all that stuff. It seems like functional medicine is probably one of the better defining ways of how you would categorize your business. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that we're definitely we're a functional medicine base for sure.
So what exactly would that mean then? Like if you were to explain that and trying to have a personal trainer translate that to a client that might be interested in understanding if that's an appropriate modality for them, how would you potentially describe that?
Yeah. So functional medicine, as a whole is, I think the thing that you hear most is root cause.
Okay.
So finding the root cause of why. Now, some things we know the cause why, and there's no cure for it so far. I mean, you can argue things like diabetes and, some of these like, or type 1, I mean, there's a lot of things there's no cure, but for example, like high blood pressure, why do you have high blood pressure? Why do you have insulin resistance? Why, do we, some people struggle with hunger when others don't, why do people have depression? Is it a deficiency of Prozac? Or
pretty
is
common.
it, yeah, I mean, it's very common, but yeah, we don't do genetic tests. We don't do nutritional testing on these people. We don't do gut microbiome testing on these people, even though we know that after a single dose of antibiotics, your risk of developing depression within that year is like 40%, and so, there's a massive link between gut health and that, and when I do nutritional testing all the time, and we also do neurotransmitter metabolite testing, which break that down. That's a neurotransmitter is basically the chemical that, feeds across all your electrical pathways in your brain. So if you think of like your body's just a bunch of nerve pathways everywhere, and it's like an extension cord. Well, extension cords don't plug into directly to each other. They basically sort of hover, and then they have these little chemicals that sort of complete that little synaptic. And so neurotransmitter is the chemical that does that. And so simply enough, epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, those things that we do here, and that way, that's a neurotransmitter. So, and that's what like antidepressants do. Is antidepressants basically, SSRI is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So serotonin recycles through the body, and the synapses go back as well. It prevents it from recycling, so it allows more to be in that little area, so you feel better. Well, why do you have that deficiency in the begin with? that, instead of just fixing that. So functional medicine is, basically going to be, instead of just feeding that, look, why do you have these kind of deficiencies? Why do you have chronic fatigue? Why do you have high blood pressure? Let's address the underlying cause. Why do you have high cholesterol?
Yeah.
If less than 20% of all people that actually have high cholesterol have a genetic problem, then 80% of the people that have high cholesterol can fix it.
Yeah. So then how would you distinguish? Sorry, go ahead.
But instead we just give them Lipitor.
Yeah. Yeah.
The best-selling drug in America.
Yeah. I mean, when we look at homeopathic, allostatic, different types of like different types of ways of practicing medicine, how does functional medicine then differ from what we would consider like the traditional style of, Western medicine that most people are probably more familiar with?
Yeah, well, a lot of it's protocol driven based on you have these symptoms, you have these lab work, and then you treat with this medication or you treat with this therapy.
God.
You don't take that step back and you look, okay, it's a protocol. A lot of it's protocol driven. And it's not that things can't be protocol driven. Even in my clinic, I have protocols developed for my practitioners and myself that we even follow on how we diagnose or how we come to the conclusion of what that root cause is. And then after we figure that root cause, like, how do we address that root cause?
How long does that normally take for people to go through the diagnostic process? And then once they're there and they kind of have an idea of what's going on, to complete the interventions or to see the benefit from that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, it varies and depends on what you're really looking at. Per se. So, I mean, some things are fairly simple, it can be done with just a simple lab panel, simply from history and physical, the medical history and seeing maybe the medications and how those interact with the body and some other lifestyle things, it's just like, I can't sleep at night, it's just like, okay, well, you have a high stress job. You decide to go to bed at 3 a.m. You sleep until 1, drink, a bottle of alcohol before you go to bed. I mean, some of these things are very easy to figure out the root cause behind that, and I think that a lot of providers would probably say that they can, would argue and help people figure that stuff out, but some people would just give them Ambien. So it could vary anything from just that initial assessment, some troubleshooting, to up to a few months. And people that have developed the more comprehensive plans, we may do an initial workup, which would be an initial series of panels. And then that would conclude with an assessment of that workup, and then maybe an intervention, and then another series. And so one example would be like if somebody comes to us, we may decide and they have pretty significant GI symptoms or things that would have us suggest that maybe they're having some malabsorption issues or, have, abnormal bacterial loads in their stomach or something like that. We may address their gut before we do anything else. So, because it'd be pointless to check and say, hey, how well are you absorbing things? What is, on a cellular level, what are you really doing as far as, your intracellular levels of all these different micronutrients. So like some people will do that out of the gate. They'll get that diagnostic testing and say, hey, you're low in all these things. You're deficient, like all your B vitamins, you're deficient, your amino acid ratios are out of whack, your omegas aren't breaking down the proper pathways in order to get metabolized so that they can create these reactions. But then what do you got to do? Well, you got to fix your gut. So we may start with the gut, fix the gut, and then move on, then see after a normal diet or what, the diet that we present with them is, see how well they're absorbing their food, subjectively, how is that affecting their life already as far as symptoms are concerned, and then do more testing out of the gate. So that could take up to 3-4 months.
Okay. So it sounds like you really do a good job of canvassing for the symptoms, distilling that into and kind of triaging that, ordering that, and which ones you probably want to order and, fix in that sequence, and then more or less cut them loose. Now, would you say most of that is behavioral, psychological, or pharmaceutical?
As far as the treatment?
Yeah, just like what you see as because you talk about root causes and basically being the main distinguishing factor for functional medicine. what inside of that would you say is the largest contributor to generally like a traditional root cause effect? Is it because someone's behaved and, drank Diet Cokes every podcast for about a year, and now that's why they have, butthole polyps? Or is that like something that, is it more psychological because they feel like that Diet Coke is just so delicious and they don't realize that their gut microbiome is screaming via the gut brain axis and is grabbing their little neurons up top and says, drink me. Like what?
Yeah. So it could be, it's funny.
It's a really good break from my 100+ ounces of water a day, jackass.
Wow.
And it's not Diet Coke, it's Coke Zero.
I just listen, I drink one little baby can of Diet Coke every couple days, if not every day.
Yeah, exactly. You know exactly. You get it.
You just raised the bottle at the wrong
and just
time.
To be clear too, like I am definitely a realist, and we like to prescribe or advocate for sustainable programs within our clinic. So like my favorite food group is peanut butter food group, the peanut butter cup food group.
A lot of protein in that. There's a lot of protein in that.
Yeah, it's like my favorite.
Peanut butter cups are protein.
Yeah, like my pyramid for like the food pyramid is like peanut butter cups, like then pizza, then ice cream. Like those are like my favorite.
Where do candy canes fit in that?
Coffee. Where does coffee fit in that?
Where does coffee fit there? Yeah.
The whole reason I'm on my Coke Zero.
Yeah, it floats.
Is because I shouldn't have more than 10 espressos.
It's actually a sailboat in the coffee cup. So, but so we believe in like, hey, you got to enjoy your life. You got to have good stuff every once in a while.
Yeah.
We may recognize what it's doing and understand the consequences, but you counteract that with like, okay, I'm going to drink 3 liters of water a day to sort of counteract that. But sort of going back to like, well, what do we see the most? I would say, man, a lot of it, even though not everybody chooses to go that route of treating, but I think that gut is going to be one of the biggest things that we're finding as an issue. It's becoming more and more popular. I'm a big believer in like, if everybody were to come to my clinic, the first 2 things that I would work on would be their brain and their gut. And that's literally the first 2 things I would work on before anything.
Mm-hmm.
And like if I had to pick that's what it would be. But sometimes, testing gut stuff, it can be a little pricey. And that's not because we're jacking the prices. It's just that stuff costs a lot of money. And unfortunately, like insurance doesn't really cover that a lot of the times. Mm-hmm. And treating it isn't as fun as just taking testosterone every day, which we also do. But, it's, that can be kind of a bummer because you may have to adhere to a relatively unfun diet per se for 4, 6, 8 weeks while you're undergoing the treatment to sort of identify, to sort of do some of the things that you need to do to fix that.
Yeah.
But I think gut and some of that isn't even like our fault. You can develop gut issues in utero when mom has antibiotics. We know that. People that have born as a C-section. People that have been on antibiotics as a child because they had sinus infections or fed high food, walking around eating Cheetos and stuff like that for 1 year old. That wasn't their choice. Those are the kind of things. And honestly, if you get in that cycle and you get on the bad side of the gut microbiome early on, you may not even have symptoms a lot like early. You may or may not. Genetics comes in as a huge player in that as well. Mm-hmm. And I think willpower too, and our complainability. Some people just don't complain or just think, hey, this is the way life is. But as that consistently stays with you as you age, some of these issues, I think, manifest more and more as adults. Mm-hmm. And we just sort of accept them as problems. And so, I think that's one of the things that's pretty big on the list is gut type stuff. But then there's a lot of stuff that's like beyond our control in a sense, environmentally. There's so many, hormone disruptors in our environment right now. The water that we shower in, the fabric softeners, the stuff that we have in our diffusers, the lotions, the soaps we use, you could go on. We're at just such a massive disadvantage, in the food we eat. it's just insane here in the United States.
Where does OnlyFans fit in that hierarchy?
OnlyFans, it just depends. It just really, that's our, like, the hidden door company. If you see the login part on our website that says login here, that's actually that's where everybody can see Andrew, by the way.
I've been working on my flexibility. That's the only place you'll find my link.
Yeah, except you're on OnlyFan, right?
Yeah. Just the one. It was a surgical mishap.
Andrew's busy running a lot these days, so we're not sure about Andrew anymore and where he's been hanging out these days.
And is he running from or running after?
Oh, I'm always running from something. I just happen to directionalize it. I just try to make it somewhat productive. Anxiety is helpful if you channel it correctly. If you don't, you just melt into a puddle of just a lack of all the neurotransmitters that you need. But
you just go out on the 285 and start driving.
Yeah, in the wrong direction usually. It's like you only last 5 minutes before I panic and I just pussy out on it. But we've talked about a lot of stuff so far.
285 isn't that the one that goes around in a circle?
It goes, yes, yep. Yep. It is. So, and then there's always doing the same fucking construction on the same 5 mile stretch. I don't know what it is. It's been like that for 14 years, but kind of pulling this back in for a second. We've talked a lot about different modalities and generally speaking, what functional medicine is, how it differs from traditional types of medicine. I guess the last question as we wrap up, one of hopefully many different segments in the future where we start to break up what those are. And by the way, if you're listening and you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you smash that subscribe button so that way you can stay up to date. And as Glenn comes on and shares about different products and processes and stuff, you guys stay up to date on that. But so as far as people are wondering, obviously we know what functional medicine is, or we at least have a sense of it. How do people that are listening, how would they know when to start to look for a practitioner in that field of medicine or to reach out? Which, by the way, if people needed to reach out and they wanted to schedule some time and chat through stuff and potentially look at your services and how you work, and how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So, obviously our website, ifp.life, we got our phone number,
Okay.
Would be the easiest way to get a hold of us. We do, initial consults for free. It's just a basic assessment,
awesome.
and, so it's basically a 15-minute chat that people are just inquiring. So requiring to fill out a little bit of, online health history, just so we can sort of identify, some of the issues. It's kind of cool. It's like an AI-based platform where basically sort of identifies key issues based on your history and, symptoms and whatnot. But, and we can review that stuff with them and sort of point them in the right direction for that.
Awesome. So ifp.life, sponsored by Coca-Cola, will take a cut of that.
Yeah.
So now,
or medicine practitioner general. The IFM website for Institute of Functional Medicine is a really good website too.
Okay.
Where you can find a local provider if you prefer to see somebody in person.
Yeah, super helpful.
I'm not a selfish person.
There you go. Some people do.
There's a lot of providers out there that do functional medicine. So
perfect. So then now that we, obviously the audience has an idea of how to get in touch with you, when should they start to consider some alternative modalities? Because again, a lot of our audiences are health consumers or people in the health kind of preventative side of things. How would they know when something's beyond their scope or when they should start looking for alternative modalities?
I think that really functional approach is going to be a lot more prominent in the future, to be honest with you. And I think that medicine as a whole will evolve, and someday all of medicine will be this way. And that would be my hope, to be honest. So I don't think that they should wait for anything to go wrong at all. I think that once you start becoming interested in your health in general, it would be a great idea to see somebody with this kind of approach, because we can help you identify key factors in your lifestyle, things to look out for, preventative type stuff, sort of evolve to sort of prevent a lot of these issues before they ever even appear. And it may sound simple, but sometimes it's not that simple. But then also be just introducing people to the concept of that. I am a believer of getting, routine testing done throughout the life. And so it's not a bad idea. I get 18, 19, 20-year-olds all the time coming for their initial lab panel because it's at least great to have what a baseline is.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if there's nothing wrong, well, I want to see what your normal stuff is. And do you have any sort of genetic things that are not showing up right now
Mm-hmm.
that we need to keep an eye on later on in life?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the answer to that is don't wait for there to be a problem. Just establish care with somebody right out of the gate. When you decide that, hey, I care about myself, I care about my future, I care about my family, and I want to take good care of myself. And I don't want to end up in a place where we have to deal with this to begin with.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think that's a fair amount for our audience to digest in the first episode. Any closing remarks, gents, as we wrap up our first appearance with Glenn?
No, but I can't wait to ask like favorite peptides, which we're definitely going to do in our next couple of episodes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
Love it. All right.
Steve.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, Glenn. For all you watching in, listening in, smash that subscribe button, like the episode if you got some value out of it. And if you want to ask Glenn some specific questions, throw a comment in there, DM us, and we'll make sure to get those over to him so we can break down an episode all about that. But until next time, gang, we hope you have a fantastic day.